owl live. The owl live? Okay.
Yes, that's right.
The owl. All right, thank you everyone for being here. We are gonna go ahead and get started in the interest of time. The time is 6:04, so I will go ahead and call the meeting to order for our Charter Review Committee, Wednesday, January 21st. First and foremost, we're gonna open it up for public comments. Do we have any public comment today? All right, no public comments. I'll go ahead and close out public comments. The third item on our agenda is regular agenda items. So first item, C1, is to consider approval of the December 17th Charter Review Committee minutes and take appropriate action. The minutes are in front of you. And with that, I would be happy to entertain a motion to approve the minutes from December 17th.
Sorry, just clarifying, they don't have copies of the minute, it was in the,
Oh, it was a packet that was emailed. It was in the agenda packet.
you just have it to sign.
No, thank you. Point of clarification, yes, the minutes were emailed to you with a packet for tonight's meeting. So, with that, do I have a motion? I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes for December 17th.
So moved.
Right, you got a
Second.
motion in a
I've
second?
read the minutes.
Okay.
Looks okay to me.
Thank you. All right, we got motion in a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, so moved. Next item is discuss the updated Charter Review Committee topics submitted by the City Council. As you know, we did review these last time, but there have been a few changes, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our attorney to go over them.
That will be big. You open that for your second reading. Congratulations, you'll be there. Your package should contain this document right here. These are recommendations from council members. These are the areas that they're asking us to look at. All of you need to understand that the council will have the opportunity at the conclusion of the commission's business to consider your recommendations, and they may add to them or detract from them. But these serve as a preliminary guideline for our discussion. They are not exclusive. You should also have received in your packet copies of relevant city charters from other cities. And so you can look at those.
We'll be passing those out.
Okay,
Yeah.
you will be receiving copies of charters from other cities, and you can use those as reference, but, understand that you're not bound by council's, requests. I mean, obviously, I think it's a really, really good idea that you take a look at them and you consider what they have to say. There are some of the concerns that I have. I mean, I think by and large, a lot of them make a lot of sense. Some of them, are more operational than they are charter. We are here to evaluate and make recommendations with regard to changes to the city charter, the fundamental governing document, the city farm grant. Recommendations that we make will wind up in a charter election. And if approved by the voters, will become a part of our fundamental constitutional document, our city charter. There are some things in here that, in my own opinion, and council members obviously could disagree, but in my opinion, some of these things are really operational that can be, or probably should be addressed by ordinance or resolution. To the extent that a charter amendment is adopted, it is the law for Farmers Branch until it is amended or repealed by a later charter election. An ordinance or a resolution can be adopted and then repealed at the next council meeting. If they try something and if they adopt a rule of procedure, which is a good example, and determine that it's just not working, or that circumstances have been changed and the rule is no longer appropriate, then it is simply a 3 business day preceding meeting posted agenda, and then a motion, second, and vote at a council meeting. It literally takes less than a week to repeal or amend. A charter proposition, on the other hand, it's a couple of years at a minimum. So if it doesn't work, it can't be changed. And some things like, for example, a requirement that council members participate in training. You guys need to make the ultimate decision on this as to whether you want to recommend that as being a charter amendment. But it would just seem to me that That's more appropriate to be addressed in a rule of procedure. That makes sense? Yeah, I don't want to say that the council members are wrong and ask you to take a look at this. By all means, take a look at it. But please keep it in perspective. You know, if you were to adopt a rule that said that, a council member were, forfeited his or her seat on the council because they failed to attend the annual training session, and there was a really good reason for the failing to attend, they're up to council, I mean, and that can't be fixed until the next charter election, which may not even happen. The charter, the subsequent charter review commission decides that it shouldn't be changed. The other concern or the other consideration is that, by its very nature, the charter is in many respects a reservation by the voters of the rights that they want to exercise over and above the authority of the council to run city government. So, the rights reserved unto the citizens are those rights that are specified in the charter. I don't, it's a philosophical or metaphysical concept. As you review the provisions, you need to keep that in mind as well. I believe that, although I may be jumping ahead on the agenda a little bit, I believe that the issues that we'll be talking about tonight, Article 1 of the charter, should be pretty short and sweet. I don't expect that we're going to be here until 9 o'clock tonight. That may not be true for the next meeting. So when we get to that item, the parallels we present and talk about it, but I think it is, hopefully we won't be able to question about that.
Thank you. Nice.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So the next item, C3, review and discuss Article 1, corporation form of government powers of the city charter. So our attorney was right in that, tonight's meeting should be pretty short and sweet. A lot of the provisions that are in the article are statutory provisions. But I do think that, we should do our due diligence to at least review the article, see if section by section, see if there are any questions, comments, concerns. Most of it, if anything, will be if you find, any verbiage errors, punctuation errors, especially for this article. As our attorney alluded to, the next meeting, will most likely be pretty lengthy. As a lot of the provisions, as you've seen, from council would kind of fall into, this is one of the sections that it would fall into. So I wanted for us to be mindful of that, to make sure that we do our due diligence, review the article, review the sections. And then, we will also have a little better understanding, next time of the particular provisions that council members have that are germane to that particular article. So we'll also, discuss that as well. So as we go through the next article, we'll be able to discuss those accordingly. So with that, I would like to just start off with, just a general blanket, just call for any concerns in particular, and then we'll go section by section. Did anybody find any particular concerns, questions about anything in this particular article? Yeah, Ryan? Okay.
Something about, farming property, and my notes through this charter are a little sketchy. I'm a little, sorry, just joined,
Section 1.08.
yeah, is the act of condemnation outlined here, or is that somewhere else on the charter? Because I did have some issues with that, and I don't see it here right now.
Condemnation shouldn't be, it's specified by state law. The right is in the local government code, the process is in the property code.
Okay, but is it referred to later in this document somewhere other than section 1?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I think it might be, because I'm pretty sure I did something later. It stood out to me.
Section 9.09 deals with condemnation of dangerous structures. Okay. That's a different kind of condemnation. Most important condemnation they're talking about is the exercise of eminent domain. 9.09 talks about condemnation, the seizure and destruction of substandard or dangerous structures. It's different by its nature. It's different. But, okay.
All right, so yeah, this 1.08 is all basically following state law provision, right?
1.08 is a general statement of general authority that the city has. It's not exclusive. And even if the charter were to not say that, we still, as a whole, the city have those powers. But it's a general statement of the city.
Is there anything that gives citizens a recourse to dispute eminent domain claims by the city?
Oh my God. They let it rock with prohibitions. Look. The power of eminent domain is lawfully exercised by a governmental entity, not just the cities, but those units that have power of eminent domain. And if it's deemed in the public interest and necessary to serve a public purpose, then most government authorities have that power. It's a fundamental authority. Under federal cases, the concept is that it is inherent in the nature of government to be able to do that. Right, state law has a very complex series of processes and procedures that have to be followed in connection with the process. So if the city of work, for example, needing to widen the roadways, accommodate increased traffic demands, to take property from adjacent property owners requires a very comprehensive process. And under the Texas Constitution, and under the federal Constitution, it can't be taken without just compensation. The determination of just compensation is, like I said before, an arduous process that requires a number of different steps. And the legislature has seen fit to discourage the exercise of that by imposing statutory traps for the unwary. So notices, deadlines, magic words, expected patch, all sorts of things.
It's fair to say on this section 1.08 that it's operating within the framework of state, federal guidance and eminent domain.
Oh, absolutely.
There's some additional powers. Yeah.
1.08 doesn't give the city any more authority than it already has under state or federal law.
Okay.
I thought one thing that schools and, they have the right to eminent domain, do they not? So would the city file eminent domain for a school? They send. Did not include schools.
Doesn't have to say that. Whether the city has the authority or not, it's going to be based on state law. The charter, it's, in this regard, our charter can't enlarge the powers that we already have under state law. Yeah, I don't know if we can, and it's,
Yeah.
we've never seen that happen before, but I don't want to say that we can't do it because maybe we could.
So sounds like this whole session could just say whatever state law says apply here. Would that not be simpler?
Would be simpler, but it already says a whole bunch of stuff. I'd simply say that the city has all powers conferred by state and federal laws and constitutions. My recommendation is that one of the goals that you need to keep in mind is to keep the number of charter propositions as little as possible. If you have an election ballot that has 50 propositions on it, voters are just like, I mean, it's a, really feel like there's a need to change that, and I don't know if there really is or not. So
I was just kind of playing devil's advocate, to just make sure I understood. So really the language here doesn't do that much. If anything,
it recites most of
what state law, but doesn't alter it in any form or fashion.
I think a lot of times
Okay.
that happens because obviously, you know, this is something that, again, as the attorney mentioned, it's something that is really showing the rights of the citizens. And so me as a citizen reading that, then I would have to go into, you know, all these different articles. And I think then as a citizen, I could read this and say, oh, these are the types of things, you know, so I think that's something also that we need to think about when reviewing the charter is, you know, that it be read in a way that we as constituents of the city would be able to interpret it in a way where we wouldn't have to. And for some of it, I will say there is some legal jargon there. We would probably have to do our due diligence to do our own research, but in this particular case, does a good job of giving all the different types. Maybe it's not all inclusive, but at least gives you an idea. I guess, and that's, you know, in my opinion, I think, you know, I think if it's not something immediately there's not an immediate need to change the language based on the interpretation, then we should probably just leave it like that. And to the attorney's point, really looking at ensuring that we don't, I mean, if we need to have 50 items, we need to have 50 items. But a lot of times it doesn't, do us any justice to do that.
So we get to the end of the process and there isn't much else that we need to worry about, we can add that back in.
All of you. But no, those are some really great points. So let's just go section by section, and again, this will be pretty quick. And really, this will be kind of how we'll go about every meeting, we'll go section by section, and then that way, if anybody has anything. If there's a section where we have folks 10 people that have questions, then we'll just go around the room so everybody has an opportunity to speak. And then we'll just go through it that way. So the first section is section 1.01, incorporation. Pretty much, we're incorporated city of Farmers Branch. Nope. All right, second section, 1.02, boundary. I do have a question, it's just a clarifying question for this one. It says boundary description omitted, is that because it was rendered obsolete based on a previous change?
I have no idea.
So I was gonna say, this sounds a little bit like what you were saying with, something changes, then you gotta go through this to make the update, and if we do something, an annexation or a sale of property, then all of a sudden our boundaries are no longer valid because we've just done something to. That would be problematic.
Yeah, exactly. Well, if you look at the editor's notes, it indicates that 1.02. My guess is gonna be that the original version of that section had a meets and bounds description of the entire city's limits.
So then we go to a Patrick amendment, which is, or the plat that is out there, that's our boundary.
Then should we just, take that one, like, it's omitted, so
So
why do we
have,
still have section 1.02?
in the last, I'd say 5 years, give or take, we did a deal with Addison where we gave them.
Yeah.
I think the West Valley's,
That's right.
Midway Road,
Yeah.
and they gave us some land right over by the apartments that are built on the toll road. So that's one example of something that's happened, but that's only one in my time directly involved, that we've actually just changed land or moved.
Yeah, that was back in 2019.
Right.
Yeah.
So on this one, to the extent we did anything provide reference, or has been amended by subsequent sales or acquisitions. And I don't know how hard it would be to find out if we've done anything other than the swap with Addison.
Hold by document. Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I mean. I mean, if we're not gonna be changing this because of those things, then why, I feel like anytime we go through the charter, we're gonna have the same question. So are we bound by statute to even have a boundary as part of our charter?
Oh, actually, that's a good point. Whether our charter specifies the boundaries or not, our boundaries are still set by other things, and they are not determined by the provisions of the charter. They're determined by what's called annexations, boundary swaps with
Sure,
adjacent
exactly.
municipalities. My guess is that this provision was in there when the charter was when it was first adopted.
Yeah,
And that set out, this is what the boundaries are. Nowadays, it's completely obsolete. So,
Is the editor's note part of the charter itself, or is that something that was added for our benefit?
added for everyone's benefit.
And the boundary description, the words omitted in friends, was that added is that in the charter, or is that a benefit as well?
That is a codified editorial note. If that makes any sense. Yeah, it's in the
so
charter.
it is in the charter.
Yeah, it is in the charter,
Yeah.
but it's not a substantive provision. It's just indicating that the boundary description has been omitted. And
Well, that's what I mean. To clean it, I'm
Just clean out.
all for cleaning it up too. Like, if we need to clean it up, would there be any statutory indication that we need to have a boundary? You're saying no. So then in order to kind of clean this up a little bit, could we, have this as a potential change to just remove the boundary section 1.02? And then if we do that, then would all of those subsequent sections move up? So would section 103 be 102? Or would there just be no 1.02, which then 10 years from now, I think would also beg the question,
Let's
right?
pay attention.
You would
What-
Yeah.
what you would do is not, that would just be not used and there'd be a little note like omitted. Because otherwise, the voters have to vote on every single number changing because that's an actual change to the charter.
There are three ways to do it. Number one, we can delete the section and renumber all the succeeding sections by moving them up. Which is, it's not hard to do, it's just that to have that in a ballot proposition looks a bit messy and wordy. Number two, you can change the word boundary to parentheses that says reserved. Or number three, do absolutely nothing. I think those are your realistic choices.
So
So I think we could parking lot this, look at it at the end. Because obviously, you know, depending on how many changes you have, because I do think based on whatever, even if it just said boundary omitted, 10 years, or whenever the next charter review, I feel like we're gonna keep having the same conversation. And again, in an effort to do our due diligence to kind of clean things up a little bit, maybe it's something that we consider thereafter, and then just make a note in the section for our spreadsheet that these are the reasons, these are why that we potentially would be discussing this at a later time. But I did want to make sure that we discussed it because it was a little different and a little off. Sorry, I didn't.
no, like your,
Yeah, okay.
I like the things.
Okay, so then I think we'll just parking lot this and then, we'll bring it up at a later date. And then if we decide to, you know, depending on what happens 8 months from now, we'll kind of go back to it. But thank you for entertaining that because it was kind of just a little, different than the rest of the section. So I just wanted clarification. So thank you. Any other questions about 1.02?
I've got just one comment.
Yeah.
I took the liberty of going on the Addison website.
Yeah.
Pulling up their section 1.02 because when I saw the omitted, of course, you know, I just raised the flag.
Exactly.
And theirs is written very concisely, and it basically says the same thing that we're saying, but it also references that the boundaries are on file with the city secretary,
Okay, that might be a good
you
option.
know, so,
For more information,
yeah,
Go to the
I think it's a good idea to
Yeah.
maybe look at the other cities too and see
definitely.
how they do it.
And the other thing too is we will have copies of the charters from the other cities for us to compare. So we'll have that before you leave today. You'll have a copy of that. But that is a very good
Not, and I
observation.
printed it too, if anybody wants to see it.
Thank you.
Can you share it with us or
Absolutely.
give it to us?
So we'll give it to Aaron
Krista?
Okay.
or here. I'll take it and then Aaron, I'll give this to you and then we can just send it as an attachment to all of our members. But I think that's a great option as well. So I think, yeah, we'll parking lot this and then we'll have maybe 1 or 2 or 3, 4 different options of what we could do for consideration. Thank you, Chris. Section 1.03, annexation of property. Any questions, comments, concerns about that section? All right, section 104, I had a same flag reserved, so I'm assuming it's the same thing that just happened. At least this one, though, it didn't have anything, so I didn't even know what it was referring to. So, okay. Is this something that is just, because I haven't seen it before, so it's something that is customary for city charters when things are,
Yeah, number one, you don't have to renumber the succeeding sections and move them up one. And number two, because it's reserved, if something else, if you decide that something else should be added to our,
we can add it to 104.
you've got a space for it.
Perfect, okay.
Basically.
Section 1.05, form of government. Any questions on that section?
Are you going through it or?
No, I wasn't planning on, I can.
Okay, yeah, I had a question.
Sure.
I didn't know if this is after this section or for section 2.05 next month when we talk about mayoral duties. But I think we ought to consider, having the mayor be even as someone who can enact local legislation. Basically, the mayor doesn't have a vote on the city council, right? I think we ought to consider that he does, because we don't have any at-large votes, it's all district. And so maybe someone with an at-large division, maybe we ought to consider some at-large seats, but that's for a later date to discuss. But
Yeah.
I think the mayor at least should have the same hours for the legislation as council members, and I don't know if that's appropriate to put in this section or in section 205.
I think it's section 2.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure, yeah, I think it's section 2.
Article 2, there's
Mhm.
there, we talked about that in some detail. There are some pros and cons and or consequences.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, you have 6 members of the council. But that's something that I'm planning on, I think they talk about.
Okay.
But it doesn't go here, but good question.
All right, any other questions for form of government? All right. Section 1.07, general powers adopted. Sorry. Oh, sorry, yes. Section 1.06, powers of the city. Thank you, Dan. Any questions? Okay. Section 1.07, general powers adopted.
Just concerned that first sentence is just so long, there's so many attachments and commas and some parts. And I had to read it several times to say, do I really understand? And is there a word missing in the implied phrase, implied thereby to appropriate, to exercise thereof? Just, it was a very long, unwieldy sentence, and it kind of goes against my philosophy that we don't want to put too much in front of voters. But if they read it, if I read it several times and I'm having to work through it, I'm wondering what, you know, I mean, after 30 years as a lawyer, drafting contracts, fighting contracts, and I'm sitting on, what's the average person gonna think?
I'm a lawyer, I've read it, I'm not sure what I think.
Yeah.
I feel like there should be 2 periods in there.
When I read the first part of it, it says enumeration of particular powers in the charter. Then you go on, it says, but in addition to the powers enumerated herein, to me, that's almost circular. Unless it's talking about those particular powers and then really referencing general powers enumerated herein. And so I looked there and thought, well, maybe we insert the word general powers as a fourth word on the second line to make it a little more clear that, make it, that doesn't look quite circular.
You know, in the next sentence, it says the city has all the rights, conferred under the Home Rule Amendment. And sorry, I'm gonna pick on you, Patrick, with this, but a lot of it comes back to the simplicity of, why don't we just say, per the state constitution, we get these rules and the Home Rule Amendment dictates.
Yeah, I was just gonna echo that, but does the first sentence add any clarity? I mean, it seems like if it started with the city of Farmers Branch shall have a home rule. Thank you. That would be the first sentence right there.
And appreciating where, you know, where our chair is coming from of saying, well, then I have to go look something else up. We can enumerate a few things underneath that, saying the home rule tells us we can do these things as a city, but we start off with the home rule amendment. That's what we're under. Here's what it tells us we can do.
Yeah.
Per the state of Texas Constitution.
That's a simple way, delete the whole thing. rather than try to read-
And then honestly, I mean, basically, the prior is in addition to the former, right? And so really just having the city of Farmers Branch shall have, and then going on from there would suffice.
Yeah.
Without the run-on sentence on top. It's not a run-on, but it's.
It is.
It's a verbose one.
I've read it 4 times. It's only.
We have an attorney though that can interpret that.
Thereby the emphasize thereof.
Yeah, I'm glad I thought about, I don't know if I really want to even mention
Two
this.
attorneys can understand.
No, I can't, I'm baffled, I'm gonna admit it, I.
Chase, third attorney.
Defer to you.
Anything?
Still trying, choke on.
Yeah, I like to try to make things that are real simple, short sentences.
Yeah,
And so it's easy to eat every paragraph. Just was, and I choked on it. So,
But this has been in the charter before.
I didn't read that last.
Okay. Well, I was just curious. I mean, how long's this been around?
Well, somebody is still charging billable hours for those deferrals.
That's exactly right.
But I'm gonna her, because she's doing it differently we did. And this
See, we're
is-
going section by section.
Yeah.
We're going
I
section by
like that.
section. It's,
Somebody in
it's
19.
making us weird. Well, I think we should probably go through the same process we did with section 1.02. And, I will, give our attorney here maybe a billable 30 minutes to figure out if it's germane and it's necessary. And just get back to us if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Quick one to the attorneys. Why is by in the second sentence from the bottom? What is that in brackets?
Yeah, I don't know what that is either.
I don't know, that's why those little cleanups that somehow got missed because a lot of the times the cleanups that you see in the past were things like this and why that got stuck in there or didn't get picked up. I don't know.
Okay. Those were revised and fillers, more of an editorial note to make the sentence grammatically correct.
They never had it to begin with, the original in there.
But I mean, anytime we add it, it's gonna, anything we add is gonna be in brackets like that? So why is it put in brackets?
It's an editorial comment that was added after.
If-
So a suggestion.
That may have been a change years ago and somebody forgot to remove the brackets. And I mean, that's
Is that a
another.
way to make a change you don't have to vote on?
So.
Again,
It's like when you sit in SIC, you know. Whatever.
There may be a provision, I'd have to look it up, but there may be a provision for trouble that allows, amendments, corrections, graphical corrections, things like that. That
Well,
can be done by council or city staff without necessarily going to an election. And if so, that may be one of the same.
If there isn't, maybe we should add it.
yeah, well, I mean, if we can, but I also would have, it would give me some pause to, you know, to have that in there too. Without a charter review. So, I mean, if we're gonna change it anyways, this section anyways, to remove that first sentence, then why not go ahead and just make that by official without the brackets, because that is a bit confusing. Yes,
I was just gonna say, if any of you have done as much editing as I have over the years of in a manager and that kind of stuff, I don't care how many times you proofread something, you get the final, says, okay, print it, there's always gonna be one or
that one dot,
whatever that didn't get caught. And I know you should probably know about that. And, so that, to me, that's what this seems like. It's
Sure,
just-
yeah.
And then somebody read a letter, said, oh, yeah, you know, but that-
sure, yeah. And so, like I said, I think, I agree with you. I think if we're gonna go ahead and make a change to that section, we can go ahead and mark that as well. So, so for this one, we'll have our attorney come back to see if that's, germane and necessary to this particular article, and then we'll go from there. So similar to 102 discussion.
If you want to consider revised language to 1.7, happy to do it, present the one paragraph.
Yep, it'd basically just be taking that sentence out, starting with the city of Farmers Branch and then removing.
That's it. I'll look figure out what needs to be done.
Okay,
I don't want to change it too much, but you know. But yeah, might cost a lot to figure out that sentence. It's already.
which is why I think you just remove it and then add the by, right?
Slide there, by to it. Hopefully. Yeah, size there not. It's not needed.
All right, great.
I'm a lawyer.
Anything else on this section? Sorry.
You mentioned possibly adding the provision that says how the council or staff has the ability to correct typographical issues in the charter.
Mhm.
That will be,
Something that we'll research.
like, that provision, that kind of language comes at the very, very end of the charter. It wouldn't be in Article 1, it would be,
And I think it'd be worth looking at possibly putting something like that in because over the years, we've cleaned up lots of little things and it seems like there's always another little thing found by the next section or next group.
right.
So this may be one that we could circumvent, future charter. Not the whole process, but
Yeah, it would be in Article 9, now, we can try I can propose something, for the next meeting, or we can wait until we reach out the line.
I think we should go ahead and, Aaron will note it to add to Article 9 as a topic of discussion. So basically what we're doing is if there is a topic of discussion that's in another article, we have a spreadsheet that'll tell us all the different ones that are germane to the article that we discussed. So that way we can come back to it at a later time. So we'll add that one to that particular article for, future consideration. And if we decide to, what kind of language that would entail. Because I think you're right. And then if we can just adopt them all at once, maybe in the next charter. But I would need, or would like to see specifications where obviously it doesn't change the purpose and of the actual item. It would just be grammatical.
Of
Yeah.
substance.
Exactly.
Or spelling.
Spelling, yes, exactly. All right, next we have, anything else for section 107? Okay, section 108, power to acquire property for public purposes. We talked a little bit already about, condemnation conversation. Anything else related to this particular section?
No, like it's just worded like state law.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think what we talked about earlier is the fact that I think a lot of this section is, it's giving numerous examples to give folks the types of things that would be covered under by condemnation. All right. Nothing for 108, 1.08? Okay. All right, so that concludes our discussion for regular agenda item 26-062. Before we go to the last item, this is kind of how I envisioned us going through each article, going through it section by section, making sure folks don't have any questions. And again, if we have one section where it's, 10 of us have something, then we'll just go in order. So everybody has an opportunity to share their thoughts, and we can, again, then continue the discussion. Does that work? Seem to work very well. Make sure that we read everything. And again, this time around, we do have a spreadsheet that we're keeping track of. Any conversations that are germane to a different section, we'll add them on there, so we make sure to track it and we bring it back up in that section. And so one of the things we did talk about was if there is a particular change that we want to vote on, that we want to vote on it before the end of the meeting to ensure that we don't 8 months from now come back to a meeting that we had 8 months prior to vote on something and have to look at everything over again. However, in this particular case, we do need a little more information. And so I think for these cases, what we'll do is we'll wait to vote on any section for the prior meeting at the top end of the following meeting. So by that time, it'll give the attorney a few weeks to look that up. So for example, in the section where we talked about 1.07, that first sentence that went on, it'll let us know what language we could use or not need to use. And then we would vote on that particular section at the top end of the following. And again, this way, we don't have to, life happens in 8 months and have to really, have to go back and look at our notes and figure out, okay, what did we talk about? What section was this? And so we vote on it either at the end of that meeting, but if we need additional information, we'll vote on it at the top end of the following meeting. Erin, does that work? Okay. Does that work for everybody, that process? Scott?
Crystal, is there a way if like a couple of days or a couple of weeks down the road, we'll pull this out, take a look and say, oh, this might be a good, if we change this to this, is there a way to get this to somebody instead of waiting until the next meeting comes out? Is there a way to funnel the information to somebody and say, hey, look, I think I have a way to wordsmith this to where we get out of heretofore is thusly and all those, and maybe do some wordsmithing and.
No, that's a great question. So I think, in the last meeting, I think we talked about if you do have any comments specific to a section, we don't want you emailing everybody because that would constitute a quorum.
Yep.
But email it, I think what we decided was email it to myself and to Aaron.
Okay.
And then Aaron will get it to our, city attorney and we'll go through it that way.
Okay.
If it's specific language or a question, the
Yeah,
question
that's
Aaron and I can answer, then we'll do that. Or if it's a question that needs to be answered by an attorney, she'll send it to the attorney. And then because we're gonna be, for example, in this case, because we're gonna be looking at the prior section at the next meeting, this section at the next meeting to vote on this, on a couple of these provisions, then we can discuss any changes or answers to questions then. Does that work?
Yep.
Erin? Okay.
And can you say there's an ethics thing when talking about this amongst yourselves?
Yeah.
When you're not in the meeting?
Yep.
Ethics is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why we said if you have any questions, comments or concerns, send those to myself and to Erin, and then, as opposed to obviously sending it to other people. Do you have a particular question related to that? Brian?
No,
Okay.
no, I just remember there was a,
Yes, no, yes, you're reminding, Brian, you're reminding us, yes, you are
Listen,
not
that
allowed to
sinks in.
discuss this outside of these meetings. You're correct. Last thing, on the agenda is, opportunity to request future discussion on items not on the agenda. You know, we talked about a couple of things during the meeting that we were gonna come back to a certain section where, that particular provision would be germane to that section. But this is an opportunity for us to, if you have any discussion on any, items not on the agenda, we're able to do that now.
so what is, we have ideas for the charter that doesn't get into the existing stuff. We talk about that now, or
Yeah, so I think the goal for this section is, for example, we have the city council provisions that we were given, right? Those are all the items that city council members want us to look at. Now, if there is a particular item, for example, in section 9, right? And you want to ask a question about it prior to, then this would be a good opportunity to ask that. But I think for the most part, we'll wait until that particular section. But if you have a question about something, then this is a great opportunity to ask the question. But if you have an idea or a thought on anything related to one of the sections, then most likely what we'll say, and Erin, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we'll discuss that during that section, and have that discussion then. Since we've kind of lined it up to where this time around, we're going section by section, as opposed to, I think, other processes that we've had in the past. At least that's my
Yeah, no,
understanding.
that's good. And the other part of it was, like, for example, when Brian brought up in section 2, there's a topic he wants to discuss. If you all would want me to note that so that we remember for when we get to section 2, so it's not forgotten. That's kind of the purpose of this.
It's gonna be that we're gonna see the same item on
Every time, yeah.
Yeah.
So that we're,
And there'll also be one at the beginning for leftovers from the meeting before.
Mhm.
or what if we have some ideas that aren't related specifically to anything in the charter now, if we're not sure what section they should go.
This would be a perfect time to do that. Like if you have a list of a couple of things that you are not sure if it's procedural or it's something that needs to be voted in the charter, then this would be a great opportunity to do that. And in that way, and again, we'll have this in every single meeting. So if you have something now, great. If you don't and you want to discuss it next time, that's fine too. But this would be the perfect opportunity to do that.
I have a few things, but should I just email them to you? Maybe you can say what meeting that might be appropriate for, or you could put it on an agenda, we could talk about it in the future.
Well, I mean, I would defer, Erin, would it be best to do, how would you prefer that we handle that? Because I think
I think in the interest of transparency, it would be better for us all to be in the same process of mentioning it during a meeting rather than emailing separately. Because with, 22 members, it can get to be a lot, something might get missed. And we can all just be on the same page.
Sooner we hear it, the better, because then we can start to factor it into our thinking as well.
yeah, and then we still have the option where if like Michael said, a week from now, if you think of something, then we do have the option to share it, so that way we bring it up at the next meeting.
Right.
But I think for now, if you do have any particular questions or topics that we're not sure what section they're in, or if they're even something that we could bring up in a charter review, then this will be the appropriate time to do that. So Brian, if you have things, we have time.
He looks like he's ready to go.
I know. Okay, so then, so the floor is yours.
I have something about multi-tenant housing. I think we ought to,
Okay,
Farmers Branch was established as a community of single-family homes, and we ought to really be hesitant when we take on more multi-tenant dwellings and that, applications for new multi-tenant dwellings or additions to existing ones should be approved by a vote of the council and can be vetoed by the mayor or the council member, which district that multi-tenant housing is going to exist in.
you're talking about like multi-family, like.
Like, I don't want to be an apartment city.
Oh, apartments, yeah.
Yeah.
Multi-family.
Your, bedroom community back when we were established, that's transformative.
Read that back again. I got approved by vote of the council, vetoed by the mayor. And then we'll think about the council member of this district. So
Yeah, somebody's proposing some big complex in District Two, that council member could veto it. I think it should be something that everybody in the city wants, basically. And along those lines, I think we ought to talk about short-term rentals,
So I will say that,
Airbnb.
yep, so those are most likely procedural, just because right now, if it's allowed by zoning, that would probably be a planning and zoning provision that would need to be, in my opinion, that would need to be reviewed, because right now, if it's allowable under the zoning for that particular area, then it still would come before council, but it's allowable by that zone. And so I think it would be amending the provisions of the zoning for that area to not allow for multifamily. So I think it would be, and Attorney, David, correct me if I'm wrong, it would be something that I know for that one would be now, I think the veto and that piece probably would need to be charter, but I'm not sure.
Christoph, question. Does it, and this may be for the attorney, so can the charter overrule, like you said, zoning or something like that? If we come up with a different law, if you will, for the city, does that overrule the existing, what the city's doing? So like, for example, abandoned houses on streets that's been there for 4 or 5 years, and we can go into, overrule the code department on their current way they go about abandoned houses and stuff like
Well,
that.
see, that one, for example, would be in section 9, I believe, when it comes to the condemnation, that we are currently allowed to do that.
Cause I was at a council meeting not too long ago, and it's not just in my area, Brookhaven. Sounds like this is a citywide issue with homes that are completely,
Allowed to.
not, well, just abandoned. And they just keep paying their $250 fee, and they just keep running, pay their taxes, and it's all good, but the people that's living around it, it's just squalor. And so, yeah, that's why I was just wanting to know. So we can make a rule
Yeah,
that overrules the current code enforcement, stuff like that.
that, I would have to defer to our attorney for that.
That's why I'm looking at, he's smiling. I didn't know. That's why I was making clarification.
You see a lot of little flowers in this future.
I'm trying to evaluate and be careful about evaluating what's more appropriate to be done by ordinance versus charter. Charter provisions are the structural provisions dealing with the form and operation of government. And our rights reserved unto the voters. We do currently have regulations on the books, comprehensive zoning regulations that deal with not just limitations and uses by right for multifamily properties in town, but also a process whereby projects that involve multifamily dwellings are approved. A zoning process that, according to state law, requires a whole bunch of steps and hurdles, notices that have magic words in it, that have to be published, posted, and sent by mail, a whole bunch of requirements. Now, I don't know whether or not a charter provision that would limit in some way, but yes, in theory, charter provisions would be adopted that would require the approval of an ordinance granting or authorizing multifamily properties be approved. They're always going to be approved by a majority vote of council. And in some limited circumstances, supermajority votes. Giving the mayor the authority to veto just multi-tenant or multi-family approvals for an individual specific council member. Yeah, process that. I mean, I think it's to multifamily and not residential in general, like Brian Gatter was, you're focusing on, you're targeting a specific category of use, which.
If I may interject on this, and maybe this is the way you're going, but if we look at this constitutionally, right, this is almost feeling like you want to have something that Congress can pass something that the president can veto, and then it goes back and the Congress has to overrule by 2/3. You're wanting to say, well, we need a provision that allows if District 2 is being overrun by, other council members who are saying, hey, yeah, let's put that toxic waste dump in District 2, and we all voted for it, then we're good. District 2 has an ability to, maybe not just on, one specific area, but saying, hey, look, if I'm, if my residents that I represent are being treated disproportionately, unfairly, I want to have a provision within the Constitution that says they can veto it. Now it can go back to review or something, and there can be an override vote, but at least we have an opportunity to prevent other groups coming together and saying, yeah, we're gonna just turn District 2 into a toxic waste dump because we can and we voted for it. So.
There are some
I didn't call it.
I know, I just, I'm going to the far extreme. I mean, you're saying, multifamily, but it really could be anything. And if we're disproportionately impacted to District 2, I'm seeing a valid argument here. Like, yeah, it's certainly like my representative being able to stand up and say, you know what, no, you're doing something that's disproportionate to my team or to my group, and I'm gonna veto it, and it allows for at least an avenue from within a constitutional framework and not necessarily.
Yeah, I'm not so much concerned with the veto ability, and there are some cities that have, where the mayor has the authority to veto an ordinance and can be overridden by the council later. Whereas I'm more concerned with the focus on multifamily as opposed to any other, in those circumstances where.
Well, like I said, we should be able to veto toxic waste. I'm going on a specific category. Would you have a problem with that?
If it were toxic waste dumps, I wouldn't have a problem with it.
So it's not that it's a single category, it's just the category.
But I think one thing too, that if we continue to explore this is the language that we use, because also we need to be careful about potential discriminatory action. And I think that's where the multifamily could come into play. Because, of that potential, somebody could come in and say, oh, well, especially, and I'll just be frank, working for the city of Dallas, there are different types of multifamily as well, right? So if you look at one multifamily, it's not like the other. And so if you look at one section, one area and say, oh, it's because it's this multifamily, and then you look at the type of people that live in that multifamily, then it could probably be being discriminatory. So I think we just need to be very mindful of the language that we use if we do decide to do something like that, to make sure that it's limited to things that are a danger to, your health, danger to your well-being and things like that, as opposed to like a blanket statement. At least that's kind of my.
Well, let me rephrase that. A number of years ago, the town of Sunnyvale a developer in Sunnyvale, sought approval of a rather dense single-family detached residential subdivision. And the city at the time had minimum lot sizes of 1 acre. After 9 years of litigation and a whole bunch of money in legal fees, Sunnyvale was vindicated by the Texas Supreme Court, which said that the city had the inherent authority to make that type of a determination. They were vindicated. And then the federal government stepped in. They have dense residential area there now. In some circumstances, the federal government regarded it, based on the circumstances, as a violation of fair housing laws. And so I'm going to encourage you to.
My goal with this wasn't to discriminate on anybody based.
No, I know that. No, I know that.
I know with cities, and I haven't seen the ratio printed anywhere, but in the past, I remember in a real estate class, there's some golden ratio of single family homes to multi. And you know, it's the health of the city. You don't want you don't want too many apartments to single family. It just overruns everything.
There have been trends over the years.
So I'm trying not to make it,
You know, in many cities years ago, multifamily was absolutely prohibited, and cities looked for ways to make sure that it didn't happen within their city limits. That trend has shifted, and in some cities, they've welcomed multifamily. And I think the trend is going back in the opposite direction. Whether or not that limitation should be something that is effectively a constitutional amendment, or is a policy determination made by council with public input is a different question.
Well, how about just then, mayoral and district of the council member of the district affected being able to overrule some zoning, yeah, any zoning decisions.
That be incumbent upon that district's representative to forcefully argue her point? Or
Well,
his
it's not just that, it's not just the district representative, it's also, there are public hearings, and we have a planning and zoning commission that's required to have public hearings, as well as the council. I mean, the council is required, and the public hearings are mandatory, and the number of requirements that has to be given to the public in general are pretty steep. So, you know, in theory,
There's
yes.
a process in place right now.
There's a fairly comprehensive process, yeah, and it's pretty rigidly controlled by state law. But I don't know, I gotta think about it, but I get it, and you know, I don't know if it's a good or a bad idea politically, but,
I'm not running for office.
no, it's not yet. I
Say that.
gotta think about it.
Well, I think the other thing too is, I do think we need to ensure that we take everything into consideration. So I think if, you know, Brian, I think, you know, as far as just point of information, it'd be nice to know if that's even something that we're even able to do. And maybe if we can get an example of, you said another city does have, you know, other mayors have the power to do that. I'd like to kind of see what that looks like and see when they've actually, used that particular provision, just see if it makes sense, because we are not like other cities. And so we also need to make sure what makes sense for one may not make sense for ours. But I think it's a good point of information to figure that out. And so I think we should definitely still entertain it and really do our due diligence to explore it, and then see if it works for us with the information that we have, if everyone's okay with that.
Let's get back to that when we're talking about.
Okay.
Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah,
I think
All right, no, I have written down.
Did you have something on that? Cause I think, Brian, I think you had.
yeah, that's just generally, I think we should
Yeah.
come back and talk about it. It would, if we go that direction, we think it's a good direction, it's gonna require a very comprehensive rewriting,
Oh, yeah.
not just the charter. It's really gonna force rewriting
Current
the planning and zoning, the council, but it's gonna be a very big undertaking. It's going to be like, you know, barrel monkeys, you know, it's gonna get, but
Whatever makes us more cautious when it comes to approving you, complexes,
yeah, there might be other ways.
No. But, you know, and looking at urban planning and looking at, you know, developments, there is kind of like always like the whole, you know, like what makes communities flourish, and there is that. So I think we need to consider that. And I think the other thing too is if, I think we need to have as much information as possible. And so maybe Aaron, if we can get a very quick primer of what the current process is for that, we can compare. This is what the process is.
Yeah.
For zoning. It goes through this because it goes through planning and zoning. It has to be, there's a notice that has to go, you know, a certain amount of days before. It has to go, I think, like 500 feet out. If it, you know, notice has to go to the folks that are, I think, a certain amount of feet out. All of that, if we can just get a quick primer, so that way we can see what that is. And that way we have, okay, this is what current, this is what we could do. This is what's been done before. This is how it was impacted. And this is, then we can think through what we want to do next.
And so do we want to bring this back at the next meeting? Like we'll have an agenda
Because-
item that's discuss anything from the last meeting.
Yeah. I think so, because I think it's fresh in our mind, and I'd rather do that instead of waiting, you know, until the end to go through those.
And then
You know,
we'll know if
non-germane
we want to
items.
move forward with that or not. We can take a look.
Yep.
Okay.
Is perchance the density in apartment complexes in the surrounding areas, is the population density part of the consideration as to whether to allow apartment complex to have certain structure, whether it's X number of floors or.
There are provisions for that, so like when I was on planning and zoning, basically, we took everything into consideration, proximity. The number, whether it was, 2 stories versus 4 stories, what does that look like, location? Is it, in the middle of a bunch of houses, or is it actually next to a commercial area, which, and so, but then the other thing too is you have to think about, it's also dependent on who's on planning and zoning, who's on council at the time. So if there's all these factors when it comes to these types of projects. So I think, so we have to consider pretty much everything whenever we would consider these types of projects.
The other thing, Crystal, a lot of people, to a large extent, that's water under the bridge. Multifamily is granted by right to hundreds of acres of land all around the city. That is a property right owned by the landlord. So if we try to revoke that multifamily right on that land, we've got a legal battle that's gonna cost us a lot of money.
So
That's a property right attached to that land.
if it's under the current zoning,
Yes.
if it's like, for instance, we've looked at this for decades now, it's the east side over by the Galleria. There's a lot of warehouses, they're obsolete, they're not their highest and best use. So the city, you probably, when you're on council, thought about, what can we do to try to get rid of the warehouses? And it's almost always the thought is, it's gonna end up having to be some kind of multifamily. So there are certain realities that you end up having to deal with, at least wrestle with, to figure out how are you gonna make the property, or give the property its highest and best use. And so the other thing, I mean, there's lots of issues that are built, they're just gonna get out there and the tentacles go out. When we did the last redistricting, we had to redraw the lines. Part of it was driven because apartments were built in certain areas, and so you had more density. And we had discussions before we drew the lines about, should we think about where more density is going in, more apartments are going in? And technically, it wasn't really an issue to use for your ultimate ruling, but something we talked about is, while it's not one of your data points, it's something we can kind of look at to say, maybe we want this line to be a little bit over here so that in the next 10 years, maybe there's not as much wrangling along all these lines. So there's a lot of issues. Ultimately, what it may come down to is we make suggestions to council because it's operational rather than, or it's just too complex an issue to try to wrestle with and put it in a charter. We've done that on several of these other reviews where we made recommendations to the council on operational issues that were separate apart from what we recommended on the charter.
And we'll be tracking that. And the other thing too is going, kind of adding to that, there is a comprehensive plan the city puts together to have those types of discussions on what areas would be best for commercial versus, warehouses versus, how to enhance park areas. And so there is a comprehensive plan. I don't know where they are in that timeline right now. They may be in the middle of a 5-year plan right now. But that's another, again, going back to what you said about, recommendations to council on these types of conversations that we're having, so.
Okay, one other thing, you mentioned short term. There's some serious litigation when we get through the courts. I think the city of Dallas had passed some. It went to the Court of Appeals, kind of got stalled there, but now it's up at the Supreme Court. Perhaps if you can give us an update on where that is. I think the Court of Appeals ruled against the city of Dallas, said that it was unconstitutional. And so there's a long fight, so I don't want we want to weigh in or drag us into a fight that's already well underway. It may be one of those where.
We had a very extended short-term rental conversation about 5 years ago. That kind of stemmed from one particular, short-term rental. We did make some provisions there, but a lot of it was also, came from the fact that we needed to abide by state law. Give it that as well. So again, we're limited to a certain extent, but again, I think we need to do our due diligence to figure out at least what our options are. What's currently, what the current process is for planning and zoning. That way we have all the information. We'll get it to everybody via email, and then that way we can kind of have that discussion at the top end of the following meeting. But Brian, I know you had a couple of Yeah, do you have something related to this?
So do we allow short-term rentals now in Farmers Branch?
We do.
Okay.
Mhm. We do.
We can't not.
Mhm.
We can't not.
Okay. I thought we did for a while.
Unless you have an HOA, then you can prohibit it.
Yeah.
Well, first case out there about Springfield, so that the HOA
You
can.
don't have to have a business license, do that fun.
You do. Well, you have to have a rental license in Farmers Branch. But it's inexpensive.
Yeah, it's something that we added to the city. So Brian, I know you had a couple of other things, so I want to make sure that we,
Yeah, let's see, recognizing that safety is one of the primary drivers of attraction and retention of citizens. We all deserve to feel safe. We should strive to be in the lowest quartile in terms of violent crime, property crime, and crimes against society, drug offenses, et cetera, amongst all cities in Dallas County, of which there are about 30. And I think we should be able to, police staffing increases should reflect these rates. So crime rate in either of these categories puts us above the lowest quartile. We should increase staffing by an amount necessary to redeem the city by direction of the chief and city manager.
so again,
Basically, if we're not in the lowest quarter of crime of all cities in the county, then we should increase our staffing levels until we are.
I think that's pretty, I mean, I agree with you on the safety piece. I do think that personal opinion, I think that's something that we should leave for the city council, because they're the ones that also allocate the budget. And they're the ones that decide how much money based on our general and all of our operating expenses. And that's, I think that would be more so operational and something that the council does discuss, I know on a regular basis during budget season, because they do look at safety numbers and crime and need. And then the chief makes recommendations on additional staffing based on the crime rates and the need and the growth of the city. And so I think it's more operational, but
In the charter though, then they can't decline due to staffing increases.
But again, I think we need to be careful. I mean, we can definitely, and I think everything that we discussed, we should add it as for consideration for everyone. I'm just giving my opinion in that I think we do need to be careful in everything that's, because it may have some effects that we may not know right now, because, I mean, unless I have something in front of me that another city has done that and they've seen, crime rates go way down, I think it's something we should consider, but I don't think there's cities that have put something like that in their charter,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah, if you do remember, 2007, you had the crash. Budgets for the cities were in crisis. But if you put something in the charter, if you could put it in the charter, if the council member would probably say, no, it's operational, you're taking that out of our hands. We need to be able to act according to all the circumstances we're in. Budget crisis, economy crisis. We have some catastrophe that requires us to divert a lot of our funds somewhere else. So I think it's one that, while we all want that to happen, that's something where we have to really lobby our council members to maybe put that. I'm not sure they don't want to put it in as an ordinance, but adopt it as a
Best practice.
Best practices.
I guess if everybody adopted it, then you just have a law of escalating budgets, because not everyone.
Yeah, right, that is true. So,
Yeah, it'd be impossible.
Yeah, I think just sometimes, I think the other thing we need to think about is the unintended consequences, of some of the things that we still want to consider that we may not be. That we do need to think about.
so this is one where, you may not like to talk in public, but you certainly can talk to each of the council members individually about ideas like this. They're good ideas.
Yeah, I think
They're,
so
they're,
too.
they're.
Not charter specific or charter.
Right.
Charter.
I think it would be mostly like, where would it be most appropriate? And I think it would be most appropriate when it comes to, the safety conversations, especially around budget season and just having those best practices put into place. In my opinion, but I think, again, definitely something that I think we need to discuss.
Well, the only other thing I had is I didn't see any anti-discrimination clauses in there. So I thought we should say the city should put no preference on any race, sex, or sexual orientation when appointing city officials, hiring, or approving vendors. All decisions in such matters shall be made on the basis of merit only.
I think that's already in the law.
Yeah,
You don't need to build it into a charter.
It's in our law.
It's state law, it's federal law. So,
We don't have anything where we're like, we're gonna reference
Mm-mm.
a vendor with,
No.
that's certain owned or.
no, there are. Just these for issuing contracts, buying items that we need. So it's already set out by ordinance and state law about how to go about appropriations and hiring vendors, but
Thanks for staying on here.
no,
I like your idea.
yeah, me
Don't,
too.
you know, one of the downsides or upsides is we both were on council for a good while, so we've seen it from that end. Hearing ideas is always beneficial, so don't take anything that we kind of push back on as a reason not to come forward with other ideas. We need the ideas. We've got council members here watching
Mhm.
and they get reports what we're talking about, so, speaking of another council member, we've got at least two, right?
Yeah,
So, it's a great practice to do, and I'd encourage you to continue to bring ideas forward as you have them, because they may lead to something that, is really good that you missed over time.
and it may lead to a conversation where it may not be something appropriate for charter, but it can be something that's appropriate to bring up at the end of recommendations to our city council members, because we did our due diligence, to do our homework on them, and I think they should do our due diligence to hear us out and see the ideas that we have, so. I like these discussions, so.
Well, everything else I have is in line with the.
With you, yeah, okay,
I have one. It's just,
Yeah, John.
number of, council members. You know, right now we're at 5. Why
Mhm.
can't we go back to maybe 3 and have 2 at large? And I think you would, seems like we're getting a little territorial with some of our council members. So see why we can't, I know why we can't do it at, you know, everybody at large, but why can't we limit the number to 3 and then go 2 at large?
I think that,
I think that's something you want me to
There was-
discuss section.
I know that was.
Yeah.
We would have to go back to federal court probably to get some kind of authorization, because
of the law,
we were forced
Yeah.
through the lawsuit, the judgment against us to go to these single member districts. It didn't, I don't think it prohibited us from considering maybe keeping single member districts and the numbers we have, but conceivably either going more districts or some at large. But I think we'd have to look really deep at the order and the judgment and get some advice of some attorneys that have experience in that area of the law to see how we would go about changing our laws.
I think there was a discussion before on it, and I think we could, I think from my memory, serves me right, I think we can go up, but we can't go down on our
It
city.
seems like we shrank our number pool. I mean, I'm in a district and there's just so many people that want to volunteer to be you know, somebody on council just because of the time and, you know, mine are a lot of young families, so they don't want to take on that burden. So we only have a limited number of pool of people that are gonna run in one certain district. It just,
No, I get
to
it,
me,
yeah.
it just seems like we would have, more candidates that would apply. And then also it won't be so territorial, you know, one council member is fighting hard for a city park, you know, it doesn't benefit. So I just don't understand why we can't, I understand, I mean, it's, you know, it's law right now, but I didn't know if we could
I mean, I think we can discuss it, because I think that's the something
6,
that,
I mean, if we put more Congress, you know, city council members on, I think it's just gonna,
yeah.
we're too small for that as far as the city.
And I think that's in the main discussion, the main article. I think,
I think the structure of the council is something that we talked about when we talked about Article 2. Another proposal, what you're proposing is 3 by district and 2 at large, but necessarily requiring redistricting, assuming that it wasn't in violation of prior judgments. I think there is a thought of going from 5 at large, I'm sorry, current 5-member districts plus 1 at large council member plus a non-female. You know, the concept needs to be, it should be that we have an uneven number of council members, an odd number. That way there's never going to be a tie that can't be broken. But I think one concept is something that will probably be discussed when we're talking about that provision of the charter, considering Among other changes to the composition of the council, five districts, one doesn't require redistricting, one at large, and a voting mayor. Let's say that
Yeah.
next. Okay.
Does anybody else have anything they would like to discuss?
Sorry, can I get clarification on where we landed with abandoned homes and the safety as priority? Are we doing research bringing those back?
Which ones, I'm sorry?
Code enforcement?
Abandoned.
So I think.
I just asked the question, if we write it up in the charter, that can go over what the current code enforcement is. And that's what I was just asking for clarity on that, you know.
On that point, the answer, you know, is, our charter provision will supersede ordinances and code provisions. If you're talking about vacant properties, we already have ordinances on.
The condemnation.
I think section 9.9 talks about it.
Yeah, we've got an odd circumstance on the Greenwich where there's a proliferation of vacant properties and people hold on to them deliberately, not because they've just been abandoned and they walk away, but they.
The dirt value's going up,
But.
is the only thing I can figure.
We died, who knows? But we do have a registration program. And I would discourage, that would in some way turn the right to people to freely use their properties the way that they see fit. They, of course, are going in favor of freer use of real estate, but I understand the concern. And if it has been addressed by council, and I think it is being addressed by staff.
Shouldn't they have to have them in good condition, like there's that one on either Pebble Beach?
Pebble Beach, it's, come on, let's go ahead and get it on out there. 5 years, like luggage.
Yeah, there's some.
Enough's enough with that.
Well, you're talking about the safe structure.
I'm gonna get that house sold or something.
Covered it up with sheet, I mean, what lit on it?
You can't miss it if you drive down Pebble Beach. It's on the north side, probably closer to Webb Chapel than Marsh.
Yeah, right in the middle, right up.
Plywood all in the front.
Just a joke.
It's been a long time.
Absolute disgrace.
I read a story, which I read a lot of different stories. That someone wrote about the fact that many millennials, children of baby boomers, are being, suddenly have property thrust upon them that they don't know how or don't want to deal with. And it's creating some of these issues. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know, but I'm.
What's that hard problem, tough problem?
I mean, it's just lost there.
Basically,
They
they don't
make it
want
long enough. So
those crossings away.
send somebody to Scotland, somebody you wanted to.
Somebody bring up.
That house sitting there.
Okay, so do you have what you needed?
Also the safety, as a priority.
Oh, so safety, I think we still bring it up next time. I think anything that we talk about, we'll bring it up and we'll say, is everybody okay with this being, for example, part of ordinance or procedure or something that we want to bring up at the end. I think what'll happen is at the end, we'll probably have a list of things that didn't make it to charter or weren't really appropriate for charter, but that we want to bring up for council, and then we can have a report that we can share with council on things that we discussed.
Yeah.
Does that sound good? And then you had a question?
Just, yeah, on future meetings, if there are issues added for the council member, suggestions, we need to highlight them, so we know which ones are new ones.
Yeah, absolutely.
Otherwise, I know this is whining, but I'll be comparing the two to see what's the new one and what's the next.
Thank you.
Yeah. so-
I don't work that extra.
Yeah, else that is new.
Yeah.
Just make sure that we're aware of that.
Yeah, we get bold or italic, something
Yeah.
that draws the attention, then next time it can just be regular.
Sure,
Yeah.
yeah, no, we can highlight them.
Okay, all right, so, anything else on future discussion items? All right, so we, I don't think we can, right?
We're past the public
We're past the
comment.
public comment period. So yeah, we have a public comment period in the beginning of the meeting. And so anything you have to wait till the next public comment period or after.
Okay.
But it would be something that if it has to do with this, we wouldn't be able to talk to you about it.
That's right, we don't know that, but anyway, okay.
Yeah. And if you have a question, I would just prefer it to Andrew. Yeah.
You can, sorry, David, can we talk a little bit about the discussion? Like, you can talk and answer questions from people. It's just when you're talking in a group that it becomes a problem. Or that it creates a core. I'll let you talk about it. Yeah. Something or something.
No, I'm good, let you go. I mean, all right, so the Open Meetings Act requires that, as a general rule for citizens input in public forums, the rule of thumb is not to respond to questions or to address the speaker, because more often than not, if we're talking about something that's not on the agenda, any discussion by council would be regarded as a deliberation violation of the act because it's not on the agenda. The act does contain at least one exception, only two, but the one relevant one is, if it's simply to ask a question of fact or policy, that question can be asked on a topic not on a posted agenda and can be answered by the board. So, I mean, and you as the chairman have the authority to regulate the protocol, so you can allow or entertain questions after public input section is over, or at the end of the meeting if you want to, or not. So.
Yeah.
Christoph, can I ask you one last question? I promise I won't ask another one. Can we bring photographs and stuff to show everybody what we're talking about? If we're talking about code enforcement and stuff like that, just to say this has been
I think the
going
more
on for 5
information,
years.
I think the more information that we have, I
Yeah.
think it's
Okay,
appropriate
good.
for the conversation.
We'll all be well.
Yeah, I think any information in the background. Again, I would say. Again, I think the rule of thumb too is, I think we do need to be, yeah, we always have to think about, and kind of just going back to the beginning, where we talked about this is the constitution of our city, and we need to be mindful of what may be appropriate here versus what may be appropriate in the ordinance or a policy or a best practice. So always have that, we need to always have that in the back of our mind. However, I do think that we should do our due diligence to entertain anything that comes to mind, because at the end of the day, we'll have a really good idea of what can be, appropriate for the charter, but then also what could be appropriate for an ordinance. And then our city council will have a great report of all the different things that, that we as constituents are, are concerned about, or ideas.
If you have pictures, maybe get them on the screen, because.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's a real handy.
I want to see picture, child appropriate, please.
Yeah.
Yes, right.
If you do have if there's anything related to today's discussion between now and the next meeting, as I mentioned, email me and Aaron, and then Aaron will help us decide if it's something that we need to send to the attorney or not. The last item that we'll have, the two items that we'll have at the beginning are public comment. And then the last item that we'll always have is opportunity for, request information or ideas. And so please come with any, thing that you think or you have a question about, because again, we should have the conversation, and then what will happen at the top of every meeting thereafter is that we'll also vote on the provisions that we discussed in the meeting prior. And if there's any information that that we advised that we needed, or that we requested from the attorney or from our staff, then that'll be emailed to us prior to the next meeting. That sound good? Anything else before we adjourn? All right, it is 7:27. I will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting. Adjourn second? Second, all in favor, say aye. Any opposition? So moved. Thank y'all. Have a good night.